caught my wife cheating, got into a car crash, and now she legally removed me as a father. There isn't a soul in the world I can talk about this with. I don't know if I need advice, a pep talk, or what. I'm typing this in a hospital room. Yesterday, at about 7:30 a.m., my wife and I were involved in a wreck. I came out with only a few cuts and bruises. Mary, my wife, suffered a crushed shoulder, broken collarbone, 3 broken ribs, and a collapsed lung. They expect her to fully recover, but for now, they have her heavily sedated. We are both 34. Mary and I have known each other since we were children. We began dating in high school and all the way through college. She's the only woman I have ever done anything physical with. Up until recently, she could say the same. We married a year after college and had our first child, Michael, a year later. 3 years after Michael was born, our daughter Carrie came into our lives. I love my kids more than life itself. They were not involved in the wreck, thank God. They were spending the night at my parents'. We were due to fly down to Florida for a cruise yesterday afternoon, but my wife decided to go out with her best friend. I urged her to get home and not drive around in the snow. She swore she and her best friend Rebecca were just going to have a few drinks. I woke up at about 5 a.m. and saw my wife's car was not out front. I assumed Mary and Becca got a little too drunk and crashed at her place. I texted Mary to tell her not to drive and that I was coming to get her. The message remained unread. I got to Becca's condo and saw the message still unread. I went inside and upstairs to the guest room and opened the door. There, I found my wife in bed with another man. I remember leaning down to pull the comforter toward me and seeing my wife laying her head on some guy's shirtless chest. The next thing I remember was being pulled off the guy by Becca and Mary. I'd probably be in jail right now if they hadn't. Mary was crying, and Rebecca and I were screaming at each other. I told my wife I was leaving, and she had 5 minutes to be in my car or to not bother coming home. She was there in 3. It wasn't a good idea to be angry driving in snow, but it was another vehicle that veered into our lane and forced us through a guardrail. The car rolled, causing Mary's injuries. The kids don't even know we had a wreck. I haven't called anyone. I'm numb, and yet I hurt like hell. Not from the wreck, but from my wife's betrayal. I want to ask her so many questions, but I don't want to know any of the answers. She obviously no longer loves me. No one with a soul could cheat on someone they love. The instant she cheated, our marriage ended. She ended our marriage, and we are no longer man and wife. I'm no longer under obligation to the vows I gave. A huge part of me wants to walk out of this room and tell her parents what she did and that she is their problem again. The only thing keeping me here is my children. I love my kids too much to abandon them, but I cannot look at Mary without feeling betrayed. After my initial post, I decided to stay one more night in that hospital room with Mary. Laying back in the recliner, looking at the ceiling, listening to the medical machines, I kept realizing there was no fixing things back to the way they were. I cried, knowing a huge part of my life was over. When the nurse came into the room to take blood the next morning, I excused myself. When Mary woke, she saw me heading out the door and called to me, but I acted like I didn't hear her. I went and got some breakfast, trying to kill time. At 7 a.m., I decided it was late enough to knock on her parents' door. Her dad was an early riser. I planned to talk to him first, and if he thought his wife needed to hear it, he could wake her. I explained to them about the accident and Mary's injuries. They cried, knowing their daughter had suffered, but would still be around for them to love. As soon as they insinuated they would help me look after Mary, I stopped them and explained the wreck wasn't what I came to tell them. I told them about walking in on their daughter with another man and that I was divorcing her. They tried to tell me not to be hasty, but I told them I wasn't the one who destroyed our marriage. When I got to my dad's, I entered through the kitchen and found my dad having a cup of coffee. He asked what I was doing there, and I just grabbed him, hugged him, and cried like a child. My mom came in, and I explained about Mary cheating and the wreck. Both of my parents were stunned. My mom asked what I was going to do. I told them I had no option but to divorce Mary and be the best father I could for my children. I heard my daughter Carrie squeal, "Daddy," and come running down the stairs toward me. That woke up my son. I spent time hugging them, happy to see them. They took a while to notice my scratches. I told them about the wreck and that their mommy was in the hospital, but would be fine. I spent the day playing, talking, holding, napping, and laughing with my children. They made me want to live again. Mary's phone was destroyed in the wreck, so nobody had gotten a response for days. Early that night, I started getting texts from my mother-in-law's phone, and I knew they had to be from Mary. I ignored them. The next day, I spoke with 3 law offices about filing for divorce. Custody is my primary focus. I want to see my kids grow up happy and healthy. I'm not going for full custody. They need their mother in their lives, but because she did what she did, she can never again be a part of my life. I went to work the next week and didn't tell a soul about the wreck. I assume by this time, Mary has left the hospital. Her parents did not even attempt to bring her to the house. As soon as I can get divorce papers filed and her served, I can be done with the biggest mistake of my life. Her actions invalidated all of that time. If I had to do it over again, I would choose a life with someone else who would actually be faithful and loyal. After my initial post, I decided to stay one more night in that hospital room with Mary. I kept realizing there was no fixing things back to the way they were. It was as if some natural disaster had taken the life we built and destroyed it. I cried, realizing a huge part of my life was over. When the nurse came into the room to take blood the next morning, I excused myself. When Mary woke, she saw me heading out the door and called to me, but I acted like I didn't hear her. I went and got some breakfast, trying to kill time. I decided to see a lawyer. After meeting with a few, I chose one I liked quite a bit. My lawyer, Nadia, has been kind and supportive. She helped me with my well-being and sanity. We went over the usual forms I needed to fill out. She phoned a private investigator her firm uses and set up a meeting. I live in an at-fault state, so while I knew Mary was unfaithful, I needed actual evidence for the divorce to go my way. Nadia arranged therapy for me and my children. I decided to stay one more night in that hospital room with Mary. I kept realizing there was no fixing things back to the way they were. When the nurse came into the room to take blood the next morning, I excused myself. When Mary woke, she saw me heading out the door and called to me, but I acted like I didn't hear her. I went and got some breakfast, trying to kill time. I decided to see a lawyer. After meeting with a few, I chose one I liked quite a bit. My lawyer, Nadia, has been kind and supportive. She helped me with my well-being and sanity. We went over the usual forms I needed to fill out. She phoned a private investigator her firm uses and set up a meeting. I live in an at-fault state, so while I knew Mary was unfaithful, I needed actual evidence for the divorce to go my way. Nadia arranged therapy for me and my children. I took the kids to school the next morning. 2 days later was Friday, and the go-between dropped the kids off with their grandfather for the weekend. I went to work and was coming back from lunch when I got an email notification from the lab. The results said my son Michael is in fact my son. The other email said my daughter Carrie is not my daughter. I started shaking my head. I knew I had to get out of the office before breaking down. I managed to do screenshots of both results and email them to myself. I went to my car and began bawling. I texted the pics to my lawyer. Nadia called asking where I was. Work was all I could manage to say. She told me to stay there and someone from the firm would be there in a few minutes. A paralegal arrived to pick me up. She took me to the firm, and as soon as Nadia finished with a client, they ushered me into her office. She told me that sometimes the tests come back wrong, and urged me to test Carrie and me again in a local lab. The go-between set up a time to pick Carrie up the next day for a few hours and take her back to Mary's parents. We did the test in a sterile environment. The results confirmed that I am not Carrie's father. I cried even harder the second time. I sent the results to my lawyer, and she called to check on me. She urged me to seek out family and not go through things alone. I drove to my dad's, crying the whole way. My mom knew something was wrong but couldn't get it out of me. Finally, I managed to utter, "Carrie is not my daughter." My mom called my dad, telling him to hurry home. We had a long cry for hours. They both expressed relief that Michael was my son, but felt badly for feeling relieved. The only thing that was certain for me at that moment was that Carrie would never want for anything she needed. As horrible as I was feeling for myself, I felt even worse for Carrie. I began to wonder if Mary knew or suspected. I wanted some answers. Nadia met with the private detective. He found nudes sent and received from various guys, tons of messages, and sexting with enough admission of guilt to sway any judge. Nadia and I planned how I was going to confront Mary about Carrie. Mary was obviously medicated for pain, but her words just cut me deep. I asked if she felt any shame. She claimed she did. I asked how the hell we were going to find out who Carrie's father actually is. Mary said she didn't know for sure who Carrie's father is. I broke down in tears. Mary was crying but asked to try and explain. She reminded me about the postpartum depression she went through after Michael was born. She said she started hooking up with guys the nights she would go out with Rebecca. Nadia asked her if she had any idea who Carrie's father might be. Mary swore she always assumed Carrie was mine. Nadia pointed out that obviously something happened and suggested maybe a condom broke. Mary confessed that happened a few times with a few guys. I lost my mind. I asked her who in the hell she was. I asked what I had ever done to warrant being treated like she did. How could she do this to her daughter? Mary essentially destroyed 2 entire families. I asked why she didn't just divorce me. She said she didn't want to lose the security I gave her. She cried. Mary admitted to meeting men from dating apps with Rebecca and using girl time as a time to hook up. She claimed she never meant to hurt me. She swore she had no idea Carrie wasn't mine. I believe her because I had no idea either, but DNA doesn't lie. I asked why she continued to cheat. She claimed the longer she went keeping the secret, the worse she felt about herself. I met with Nadia after work. She told me she met with the private detective. He didn't have recent evidence, but he found enough admission of guilt in Mary's old cell phone to sway any judge. We planned how I was going to confront Mary about Carrie. I called our usual sitter and asked if she could come over for a few hours to look after the kids. I made a beeline for my in-laws' house. I didn't bother calling first. When I got there, I knocked on the front door and asked to see Mary. Her mom led me to her childhood room where she was recuperating from her injuries. I turned to her mom and placed my hand on the doorknob before telling her Mary and I needed to chat. I asked Mary who she thought she was trying to pin our split on the fact I could never love her again. She said it was the truth. I told her the reason I could never love her again is the fact she is a lying, deceitful, worthless, promiscuous woman. Mary and I talked for several hours. She told me about her depression after having Michael. She said she felt love for me and for Michael, but felt dead inside. She started to resent not getting to be young and free. She told me she got really drunk the second time they went out and let some guy feel her up while she gave him head. She felt guilty but began to resent not getting to be young and free. She told us she started hooking up with guys the night she would go out with Rebecca. She claimed she didn't want to develop feelings for any of the guys. Nadia asked her if she had any idea who Carrie's father might be. Mary swore she always assumed Carrie was mine. Nadia pointed out that something happened and suggested maybe a condom broke. Mary confessed that happened a few times with a few guys. I lost my mind. I asked her who in the hell she was. I asked what I had ever done to warrant being treated like she did. How could she do this to her daughter? Mary admitted to meeting men from dating apps with Rebecca and using girl time as a time to hook up. She claimed she never meant to hurt me. She swore she had no idea Carrie wasn't mine. I believe her because I had no idea either, but DNA doesn't lie. I asked why she continued to cheat. She claimed the longer she went keeping the secret, the worse she felt about herself. I met with Nadia after work. She told me she met with the private detective. He didn't have recent evidence, but he found enough admission of guilt in Mary's old cell phone to sway any judge. We planned how I was going to confront Mary about Carrie. Driving home, I wanted to end it all. It seemed like the most beneficial solution for everyone. But by the time I got home, I said no. Nadia is drawing up divorce papers and legal paperwork to have me declared not Carrie's father. The legal team is researching ways to find out who Carrie's father is. Even if the results don't come back pointing to a certain individual, they might point to a relative. Whomever the guy is, he may not be ready to accept a child he didn't know about, but I doubt it will be nearly the terror I felt losing my daughter forever. The kids came back to the house. I dreaded it. I had no plans to mention divorce, paternity, or any issues with the kids. Jessica, the intern from the firm, pulled into the driveway. I walked outside, smiling as I approached the passenger side of Jessica's car. As soon as I saw Carrie in her car seat beaming a huge smile at me, I started crying. I grabbed Carrie and Michael and hugged them. I told them I missed them. I kept crying. Seeing them and knowing she isn't mine just broke my heart all over again. Jessica helped me get them into the house. Carrie just kept her arms around my neck. That child broke me. I wanted to be strong, but no kid should hear a parent cry like that. I realized we both survived, but it's going to leave scars on our souls. But as survivors, we need to stick together. I have been looking at this as Mary taking my daughter from me, but it is just as true to say Mary took her father from her. The villain in this story is Mary. I'm done feeling like I should feel guilt for anything. I refuse to let damage her the way she damaged me. The day after my name was officially removed from Carrie's birth certificate, I filed a petition to legally adopt her. That had been my plan all along. I chose Carrie. I want her to remain in my life. I just felt I needed to legally set the record straight and open avenues to opportunities we never got. Carrie is my daughter. No, it is not to the same extent as Michael is my son, but I'm her dad, and I want her to remain in my life. I want the kids to know the truth someday. I want them to understand that as much as I despise their mother, I gave myself the option to choose or not choose Carrie as my daughter. I chose Carrie. Quite a few people messaged me, asking how I handled Mary, telling the kids we could never get back together, because I could never love her again. The very next day after school, I took them both out for ice cream at a local park. Michael seemed resigned to the fact I don't love their mom but didn't like it. Carrie didn't like hearing that I don't love her mom, and me telling her that her mom doesn't really love me didn't help. There was a lot of crying and confusion on their part. I was sure to tell them, without a doubt, that their mom genuinely does love them, and I love them more than anything in this world. But they needed to hear the truth and face a reality none of us asked for. Carrie asked me why I don't love her mother. I wanted to be as honest as I could be with her, but I didn't think there was any age-appropriate way to tell her that her mother is a deceitful person. Telling her that her mom lied to me and hurt me was all I could come up with. She hugged me to try and console me. It nearly broke my heart considering she had things to be consoled over she didn't know about yet. Michael asked me what was going to happen concerning the divorce. I told him that they would live with me and I'd look after them in their home during the week. I explained the court would figure out what weekends they would stay at their grandparents' house with their mom. I promised them their mother and I would keep our arguing between us from that point forward. Carrie said she wanted her mother to stay with us. It hurt me to tell her that was never happening ever again under any circumstances. But she had to be told. She said her mommy had said she wanted to come back and stay with us. I looked her straight in the eye and told her I have no doubt their mom would like to keep staying with us. I told them both that it was impossible for me to explain at that time, but their mother had betrayed all three of us. I said they weren't old enough to understand at that moment, but I promised one day I would tell them exactly why I felt their mom didn't deserve to live with us anymore. Carrie seemed to accept that more than Michael. Oddly, he began to ask how old he had to be to know what his mom did. He didn't like it when I told him it had nothing to do with age, but instead a maturity level. He said it was a cop-out. I didn't argue with him. I said I wanted them to love their mom and treat her with respect because, as far as they know, she has done nothing wrong to them. They will know someday. I will leave letters to them in my will if I have to, just in case. Barring that, I'll tell them myself when they are old enough. Knowing it will negatively influence their opinion of her, I have a feeling they will soon see a version of their mother that will do much of that for me. One day, they will know what she did to all of us, but we stuck together and made a decent life for her three biggest victims. I'm not capable of faking it in front of them and acting like their mom means anything to me. Their mother is completely repulsive in all ways. If she died, I would not shed one tear for her vile soul as she splits hell wide open. She deserves it. I hate her for what she has done to me and the children. I hate her for what she has allowed herself to become. I hate her for the stress and tears she has brought to our extended families. She deserves no forgiveness, chances, and least of all, compassion. A few weeks after our talk, the kids came home from their grandparents' house with a letter via my son. It was sealed in an envelope with my name on the front. I couldn't throw it away in front of the kids, so I just placed it on the counter with the junk mail. After I got the kids to bed, I passed by the letter and decided to read it. Mary started out apologizing to me for hurting me. She claimed she never meant to let things get that far, forgot who she was, and wanted to be. She apologized for hurting the kids. As much as I despise her, I had to give her credit. If she'd stopped there, I might have given her a bit of respect.